This is Gary Kavanagh, and if you can hear my voice, that means that you are watching Gript's weekly review of our top stories. Also that you're not dead yet, which must be a terribly comforting thing to have confirmed to you. Nivu Breen wrote in the Practical Issues with Anne Rabbitt's comment that up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees could shortly arrive in Ireland. Niamh argues that the simple truth of the matter is that, on a practical level, we can't possibly house 100,000 refugees in Ireland. Claiming we can, she says, is just virtue signalling and cruel to Ukrainian families who may hear these promises and believe them to be true. It's almost as if our long-cherished political tradition of barely keeping the country ticking over has consequences that limit our ability to respond to disasters and sudden events. John McGirt writes on the need to understand why certain people in the West have sympathy for Vladimir Putin. He argues that while he himself does not hold much love for Putin, it's important to recognise that there are legitimate reasons for people to take issue with the portrayal of the Ukrainian war, which simply says that Ukraine is good and Russia is bad. John closes his argument by saying that Putin, by starting the war, ultimately has to take responsibility for it, and that people in the West should not be blinded by contrarianism when examining the war. Britain's General Medical Council has dropped a case against a pro-life doctor who had been providing abortion pill reversal treatment. Dr. Dermot Kearney, an Irish-born NHS consultant, found himself being investigated after the abortion provider Marie Stopes lodged a complaint that Kearney had imposed his personal beliefs on some of his patients, and that Kearney, as president of the UK Catholic Medical Association, was highly unlikely to be able to offer objective, impartial advice. The General Medical Council was unable to find any patients who were willing to speak against Kearney, with a number of his previous patients being noted as having spoken very highly of him, but one of Kearney's former patients did say she had felt scared and pressured by Marie Stopes after they contacted her in an attempt to gather evidence against Kearney. David Reynolds wrote in the resignation of UCD professor Ben Tanra from a role in UCD after the professor disagreed with the tone of the university's response to the invasion of Ukraine. Reynolds asks if the West, or NATO itself, can be blamed for acting in a fashion which increased the likelihood of war, and if the war we are now seeing, whilst the fault of Putin, was not a foreseeable event which could have been avoided if we had approached it correctly. Finally, John McGirt writes on the ascendancy of Ivana Bacik to the leadership of the Labour Party. The problem for Labour, he says, is that having fought for dramatic changes in Irish society, and having won those battles, Labour now finds itself the party of the establishment, while pretending occasionally to represent working people. Under Bacik, the best the Labour Party has to look forward to is finally being able to campaign openly as the party of people who are better than you, both morally and intellectually.